All right, guys, I just want to do a little mini lecture on human impacts on the ocean because I don't want to go through the whole PowerPoint, the ocean's PowerPoint, just because we're focusing specifically on marine biology. So only we humans make waste that nature can't digest. This was said by Captain Charles Moore. I think it's an interesting thought because it is pretty true. So I kind of want you to think about that as we go through this PowerPoint. So coral bleaching happens in response to ocean acidification, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But what happens is corals have this photosynthetic or symbiotic relationship with photosynthetic zoolanthe, which is a photosynthetic algae, which is what gives it its color. And as oceans become more acidified, it actually does harm to the zoolanthe. And can bleach the coral, and the coral can't survive without this symbiotic relationship. So this is what causes coral bleaching. Most of you have probably seen or know about oil spills and the effects that oil spills have on the oceans. Oil is nonpolar, so that means that it doesn't mix with water. And so basically it just kind of sits on the top of the ocean and it coats just pretty much anything that comes in contact with it. And it spreads so quickly that there are little to no solutions on how to get oil out of the ocean once it's been spilled. And this can happen either through ships running aground that are carrying oil or oil leaks from offshore platforms that are gathering oil. Ocean acidification, which I mentioned on the coral bleaching slide, happens when water and carbon dioxide meet and they bond, and it creates carbonic acid. And so this depletes the carbonate in the seawater, and carbonate is what organisms need to create shells, and crustaceans need to make their exoskeleton. And so when this is depleted, not only can it cause coral bleaching because it causes harm to the zoolanthe, but it can also cause a reduction in the shells of organisms that have shells, and can make conditions more favorable for some organisms for others, and so thus can change the food web in the ecosystem. Overfishing is a really big deal. There's even courses you can take in college that specifically focus on fisheries methods, but we'll just kind of skim over it for now. We'll do more on it at the end of the term. But what happens is, as technology has improved, we're able to basically scoop up more fish up out of the ocean than we ever used to be able to. So instead of just taking a few fish out of the ocean and allowing them to replenish, we're able to scoop giant, big, huge schools of fish out of the water, basically taking almost every individual, which leaves little to none to reproduce, which forces the organisms that are left to reproduce at a younger rate and a smaller rate. And so it can actually cause a decline in the mean trophic level. So if you look at this diagram, it just shows you the physical impact of the fishing gear. Bycatch, which is what happens when you catch things you don't really intend to catch because you're just scooping up everything in the area. A lot of things are going to die in transit. And it can also destroy habitat because not only are you scooping up organisms that you intend and that you don't intend, but you can also be scooping up parts of the ocean floor. So it can destroy these biological interactions that organisms have and just cause complete havoc. Now pollution, you guys probably know plenty about, but everything eventually ends up in the ocean at some point. And so all of this plastic that we use and then don't reuse, a lot of it ends up in the ocean. And so this is why, if you were asking me about balloons, I do not like letting balloons go because they end up in the ocean, and then sea turtles think they're jellyfish and they try to eat them and it kills them. So I think it's really important to understand the impacts that products that we make on land can have on marine life. And we'll talk more about this when we do ecosystems, but I just wanted to touch on it. So a couple of solutions, and this is one of the things I want you guys to think about. Recycling, obviously, because we can reuse the materials, the plastic materials that we use, and get more use out of them. We're using reusable drinking containers, like this one. Just put water in it whenever you're thirsty instead of getting a water bottle. Same thing with Coke products. Water's better for you anyway. You really shouldn't drink soda. But Just make sure you recycle if you do. It's really important to check to see if you're going to eat seafood, is it a sustainable organism that I'm eating? And a way you can do that is you can get an app called Seafood Watch. It's through the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And when you go to a restaurant, you can type in the type of fish that you want to eat, and it'll tell you whether it is a species that is good for eating. Not taste-wise, but like number-wise in the ocean. It can also give you an idea of whether that fish is usually caught sustainably or not. And it's always a good idea to ask about your food at a restaurant anyway. You're going to pay for it, so you might as well ask. You know, if I'm going to eat this fish, you could say, hey, where was this caught? Or do you know if this was caught sustainably or was it farmed? So it's a really good idea to kind of know where your food comes from anyway. I think that's kind of a duty for us to understand where our food comes from. So one of the things I want you to think about, and I'll have you post on Edmodo about this probably next week, about your thoughts to solutions to some of the problems that we have due to human impacts on the oceans. So I want you to kind of think about it a little bit, come up with some ideas, and then tell me your thoughts. So hopefully I will see you next week.